Have you ever looked into the eyes of your own blood and realized there is no humanity left behind them? Imagine opening your door and finding two little lives with a life sentence scrawled on paper. My sister did not flee poverty. She chased a multi-million-dollar empire, using me and her children as sacrificial lambs for the sickest game. Listen closely, because sometimes family will frame you to secure their wealth. Hello, and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without a budget to keep operating and paying our hardworking staff. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our team can afford their living expenses and continue bringing these stories to you. You can do this by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the donate link in the description or comments below. My name is Greta Ingram. I am 32 years old, and I work as a project manager at Nexarian Sync, a highly demanding artificial intelligence development firm based in Seattle. My life has always been a meticulously structured routine of morning meetings, code reviews, and late-night strategy sessions. I thrived in the predictable logic of algorithms and data. Nothing in my carefully curated world could have prepared me for the utter collapse of reality that awaited me on a seemingly normal Tuesday morning. The Seattle air was wrapped in its usual damp, gray chill as I grabbed my travel mug of coffee, slung my laptop bag over my shoulder, and unlocked my front door to head to the office. I pushed the heavy oak door open, expecting nothing but the quiet rustle of the wind through the pine trees. Instead, I froze. My breath hitched in my throat, and my coffee mug nearly slipped from my trembling fingers. Sitting on the cold wooden planks of my front porch were my nephew and niece, Mia, who had just turned 6 years old, and Leo, who was only 4. They were not huddled together in fear. They were not shivering, nor were they crying. In fact, it was the exact opposite. And that was what made the scene so profoundly, deeply unsettling. They looked immaculate. Mia was dressed in a pristine, tailored trench coat that looked like it came straight from a Parisian runway. Her hair braided perfectly with silk ribbons. Leo wore miniature leather loafers and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. They were casually sitting on my damp porch, happily chewing on colorful artisanal macarons and clutching brand new, incredibly expensive-looking robotic toys. They looked up at me with bright, unbothered eyes. "Aunt Greta," Mia chirped cheerfully, brushing a crumb from her designer coat. I could not speak. My eyes darted from the children to the massive mountain of luggage piled neatly behind them. There were 4 large suitcases, all adorned with the unmistakable monogram of Louis Vuitton, stacked with a chilling sense of deliberation. Tucked neatly beneath the leather handle of the largest suitcase was a piece of heavy cardstock. I stepped forward, my legs feeling like lead. I ignored the kids for a split second, my eyes entirely fixed on that piece of paper. I pulled it free. It was my sister Elena's handwriting. The elegant, sweeping cursive was unmistakable, but the words carried a venom that made the blood in my veins run ice cold. "I will be back when they are 18. There was no signature, no apology, no explanation, just a life sentence, delivered in 10 words, casually abandoning 2 human lives as if they were inconveniently heavy carry-on bags. "What are you doing here, sweetie?" I asked, my voice cracking, desperately trying to keep the mounting panic out of my tone. Mia smiled broadly, holding up her new toy. "Mommy said we get to play a secret spy mission with you. It is a super special game. She bought us all these new things, and the #1 rule of the game is that Mommy has to go invisible for a really, really long time. If we are good for you, we win." A sick, twisting feeling knotted in my stomach. The pure, unadulterated innocence in her voice clashed violently with the sociopathic cruelty of Elena's actions. Elena had not just abandoned them, she had weaponized their own childhood imagination to ensure they would not put up a fight, leaving me to eventually be the monster who would have to break their hearts. I quickly ushered the children inside out of the cold, settling them on the living room rug with their toys and the television turned to a cartoon. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlock my phone. I dialed Elena's number. I pressed the call button, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The line clicked. Then, a cold, automated voice echoed through the speaker. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I hung up and dialed again, and again. I called her exactly 24 times, refusing to accept the reality of the situation. Every single time, the same dead, robotic voice answered me. She had not just turned off her phone, she had completely erased her digital footprint. The phone line was dead, permanently deactivated. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over me as I walked back to the entryway and knelt beside the mountain of designer luggage. I unzipped the front pocket of the largest suitcase. Inside, I found a thick, sealed manila envelope. I tore it open. My breath caught in my chest. Spilled out onto the floor were Mia and Leo's original birth certificates, their pristine passports, their social security cards, and their complete medical records, everything a legal guardian would need to enroll them in school and manage their lives. And there, sitting at the bottom of the envelope, was a heavy brass key to a bank safety deposit box. This was not a manic episode. This was not a temporary breakdown or a mother running away in a moment of overwhelmed panic. As I stared at those meticulously gathered documents, the horrifying truth washed over me. This departure was calculated, premeditated, and executed with a level of cold-blooded precision that terrified me to my very core. I stared at the television screen where bright animated characters danced in vivid colors, holding the unbroken gaze of two completely oblivious children. My first instinct, the logical response of any rational adult discovering abandoned minors, was to immediately dial 911. But my thumb hovered paralyzed over the glass screen of my mobile phone. If I brought the authorities into my living room right now, uniformed officers would march heavily up my front steps. Social workers carrying thick clipboards would sit on my sofa, asking cold, invasive questions. Mia and Leo would be thrust aggressively into a terrifying, sterile legal system, and the fragile, innocent illusion of their secret spy game would violently shatter into pieces. I could not do that to them. I refused to let their first day of abandonment be marked by police sirens and strangers taking notes. I needed solid answers before I brought the heavy, unyielding hand of the law down on our family. I opened my laptop, clicked on my email application, and typed a brief, direct message to my department director at Nexarian Sync, requesting an immediate and indefinite family leave of absence. I shut the computer without waiting for a reply. My corporate life was over for now. It was time to hunt. Elena was a master of manipulation and deception, but she was never truly a ghost. Someone in her flashy orbit always knew her next move. I thought of Marcus, a high-end nightclub promoter and Elena's longest-running accomplice in her various social climbing endeavors. I found his contact and dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with his usual exhausting, arrogant sarcasm. Well, if it isn't the responsible, boring sister, what do you want, Greta?" I skipped the meaningless pleasantries. "Where is she? Marcus, where is Elena?" He let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed terribly in my ear. "You really do not know? She did not tell her own flesh and blood? Honey, your sister packed up her entire fabulous life and flew down to Miami exactly 7 days ago. 7 days. She had been gone for a full week, plotting this morning's drop-off with sickening precision. Miami? I asked, my voice tight with confusion. Why on earth would she go to Miami? Marcus sighed loudly into the receiver, sounding utterly bored by my ignorance. Check your direct messages. I am sending you a link right now. Prepare to have your mind completely blown to pieces. My phone buzzed sharply with a notification. I clicked the provided link, and it opened a private, heavily curated social media profile operating under the name Elena Vance. Vance. The name hit me like a physical blow. I scrolled furiously through the grid of perfectly edited, color-coordinated photographs. There was Elena, draped in flowing white silk, lounging on the polished deck of a massive luxury yacht. There she was again, holding a sparkling crystal flute of expensive champagne at an exclusive charity gala. And in almost every single picture, she was clinging tightly to the arm of a tall, sharp-jawed man possessing cold, intensely calculating eyes. I recognized him instantly from the covers of elite business magazines. Julian Vance. He was the sole heir to a ruthless, global real estate empire worth billions of dollars. But Julian Vance was not just famous for his astronomical wealth. He was notoriously, aggressively vocal about his personal lifestyle choices. He was the ultimate, unapologetic poster child for the elite child-free movement. He had given countless public interviews explicitly stating he despised the noise, the messy chaos, and the financial distraction of children. He had vowed on national television never to have any offspring and famously refused to even casually date women who carried the baggage of motherhood. I scrolled further down Elena's profile, my horror expanding into a blinding rage with every swipe of my finger. She had not just hidden her children. She had completely fabricated an entirely new human existence. Her sophisticated biography proudly declared her a solo female tech entrepreneur, a fiercely independent woman who had never been married and, most crucially, had never borne a child. There was absolutely zero trace of Mia or Leo on her glowing digital footprint. No messy birthday cakes, no finger paintings stuck to a refrigerator, no tired morning selfies. She had digitally and socially eradicated her own flesh and blood to fit seamlessly into the sterile, quiet, impossibly wealthy world of a billionaire who hated kids. A sudden, sickening realization stopped my breath. The lavish lifestyle she was projecting on that digital screen, the custom designer gowns, the private jet rentals, the expensive media campaigns, all of it cost an absolute fortune. Elena was always chronically broke, bouncing from one failed business venture to another. Where did she acquire the massive capital to fund this monumental cinematic lie? I sprinted down the hallway and grabbed the heavy brass bank key she had left in the manila envelope. I called my next-door neighbor, a retired schoolteacher, begging her to come sit with the children for 2 hours, promising her it was a sudden work emergency. The drive to the downtown bank branch was a suffocating blur of aggressive traffic and mounting, terrible dread. I practically ran through the revolving doors and slammed my hands onto the polished marble counter of the bank, demanding immediate access to the family trust box. The branch manager led me silently into the quiet, heavily reinforced steel vault. I inserted the brass key with shaking hands, turned it until it clicked, and pulled the heavy metal drawer out. It was empty. The bottom of the long box was just bare. Cold metal. No municipal bonds. No trust documents. No savings certificates. I rushed back out to the manager's desk, my voice raising in panic, demanding to see the complete transaction history for the joint education fund our late grandparents had so carefully set up for the children. After 10 agonizing minutes of strict security verifications, the manager slid a thick, printed ledger across the mahogany desk. I stared at the black ink numbers, my vision swimming. Over the past 6 months, Elena had executed a series of massive, systematic financial withdrawals. She had drained the entire account down to zero, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The money meant to secure Mia's future college tuition, the funds meant to give Leo a safe start in life, were completely, irreversibly gone. She had stolen her own children's inheritance to buy Cartier diamond jewelry, lease a pristine white Porsche, and hire a luxury public relations firm to meticulously build her fake heiress persona. She had literally sold her children's future to buy her way into the Vance family fortune. I returned to my quiet house with a heavy heart and a file folder thick with damning bank statements. The empty safety deposit box record felt like a physical weight in my hands. I had gathered enough undeniable proof of severe financial abuse and physical abandonment, pushing down my mounting anxiety. I picked up the telephone and dialed the local Child Protective Services hotline. I spoke to a social worker for over an hour, detailing every agonizing fact, and officially initiated the strict legal process to establish emergency guardianship. I needed the full, uncompromising protection of the family court to build an impenetrable fortress around Mia and Leo before their mother could do any more damage. I should have known the legal machinery would trigger an immediate alarm in her meticulously curated world. Exactly 48 hours after I filed the preliminary paperwork, my mobile phone vibrated violently against the kitchen counter. The caller identification screen simply read, "Restricted." I answered, pressing the cold glass of the phone against my ear. It was Elena. Her voice was not panicked or apologetic. It was a cold, venomous hiss that sliced right through the digital connection. "Withdraw the guardianship petition right now, Greta," she commanded softly. There was no preamble. She did not ask how Leo was coping with his new surroundings. She did not ask if Mia was crying for her mother at night. She only demanded absolute, unquestioning obedience. "You abandoned them on my porch, Elena," I replied, forcing my voice to remain perfectly steady despite the violent trembling in my hands. "You stole their entire future. I am protecting them from you." She let out a low, dark laugh that chilled me to the bone. "You always were so pathetically self-righteous. You have no idea what you are messing with. You are going to regret this for the rest of your miserable life." The line went completely dead. The very next morning, the nightmare truly began, and I learned firsthand the terrifying power of a narcissist backed into a corner. Elena did not just hire an expensive lawyer to fight the custody petition. She orchestrated a massive, psychotic, and entirely fabricated counterattack. She walked directly into a Miami police precinct, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face, and filed a horrifying criminal report. She told the detectives that I was severely mentally unstable. She spun a tragic tale claiming I was obsessed with her glamorous life, suffering from dangerous delusions of grandeur because I was tragically infertile. The killing blow of her story was the most audacious lie of all. She claimed that while she was away on a brief, 3-day business trip, I had broken into her hotel room and violently kidnapped her 2 beloved children. At exactly 6 o'clock the following morning, the reality of her malicious lie shattered the peace of my home. 4 heavily armed local police officers stormed onto my property, their fists pounding relentlessly against my front door. They flashed a search warrant in my face and pushed past me, their heavy boots tracking dirt across my hardwood floors. They tore through my house like a hurricane, aggressively searching for any evidence of a violent kidnapping. Mia and Leo woke up screaming. They were utterly terrified by the loud voices, the chaotic movement, and the flashing red and blue lights reflecting through their bedroom windows. The officers physically separated me from the crying children, forcing me to sit on the living room sofa while they interrogated me like a violent, unhinged criminal. The chaos of that morning did not stay contained within the walls of my house. The police immediately contacted the Human Resources Department at Nexarian Sink as part of their routine background investigation into my mental stability. By 12 o'clock noon, my department director called me. His tone was icy and strictly professional as he informed me that due to the severe nature of the active criminal allegations, I was being placed on an indefinite, unpaid administrative suspension. My career, my only reliable source of income to feed these children, was wiped out in a single sentence. But Elena did not stop at weaponizing the local police force. She went straight to the court of public opinion. Blind items and anonymous tips started flooding glossy tabloid websites and local Miami television news channels. The narrative was perfectly and ruthlessly crafted. It painted the picture of a brilliant, high-society entrepreneur who had her beloved children snatched away by a deranged, jealous, and barren sister. Elena played the role of the tragic, heartbroken mother to absolute perfection. She soaked up the immense public sympathy and, more importantly, used that victimhood to manipulate the massive wealth and legal power of the Vance family. Her billionaire fiancé's fixers were suddenly circling me in the shadows, turning the entire world against me. I felt like I was suffocating under a thick, heavy blanket of gaslighting and lies. I sat in a freezing, windowless interrogation room at the downtown police precinct, staring at 2 aggressive detectives who were slamming my own perfectly pristine life against me. They were inches away from putting me in steel handcuffs and throwing Mia and Leo into the dark nightmare of the state foster care system. But Elena, in all her arrogant, narcissistic glory, had made one massive, fatal miscalculation. In her rush to completely destroy my life, she had forgotten about the tiny, inconspicuous security camera tucked tightly under the eaves of my front porch. I looked the lead detective dead in the eye and demanded he look at my cellular phone. I pulled up the cloud storage application and pressed play on the video recorded that fateful Tuesday morning. The high-definition footage played out in complete silence. It showed Elena, clear as day, at exactly 5:15 in the morning. It showed her hauling the heavy designer luggage onto my porch. It showed her leaving her own children in the freezing dawn air, turning her back, slipping the handwritten note under the handle, and practically sprinting away to a waiting black town car. The detectives watched the small screen, their expressions morphing from hostile skepticism to absolute, stunned silence. The criminal kidnapping charges were dropped immediately. The oppressive, terrifying weight of a prison sentence vanished in an instant. I was free to walk out of that precinct and go safely home to my niece and nephew. Yet, as I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, the air in my lungs felt heavier than it ever had before. Escaping the immediate legal trap was a massive victory, but a new, bone-chilling realization settled deep into my soul. Elena's cruelty was not just an act of selfish desperation. It was a calculated, predatory strike. Her capacity for malice extended far beyond anything a normal human brain could possibly comprehend, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning of her sick and twisted war. The house was finally silent. Mia and Leo were fast asleep in the guest room, completely exhausted from the chaotic emotional whirlwind of the past few days. I stood alone in the dimly lit laundry room, mechanically sorting through a massive pile of their expensive designer clothing. Leo had dragged his favorite smart teddy bear through the mud in the backyard that afternoon, and the plush toy desperately needed a deep cleaning. The toy was one of those high-tech models that could connect to wireless internet and sing customized lullabies. I unzipped the hidden compartment on the bear's back to remove the battery pack before throwing it into the washing machine. As I pulled the plastic casing out, my fingers brushed against something hard and entirely out of place, stitched deep into the synthetic stuffing. I frowned. Digging my fingernails into the thick white padding, I pulled out a tiny, sleek black rectangle, no larger than a standard piece of chewing gum. It had a tiny USB port on one side and a microscopic lens on the other. It was not a toy component. It was a military-grade, voice-activated micro-recording device. My blood ran completely cold. Elena must have hidden it inside the bear to secretly monitor the children's conversations, or perhaps my reactions during the first few days. But in her manic rush to abandon them, she had completely forgotten to retrieve it. My hands shook violently as I carried the tiny device to my home office. I plugged it directly into my laptop. A folder instantly popped up on my screen, containing dozens of compressed audio files dated over the past 6 months. I clicked on the most recent file, created exactly 3 days before she dumped the children on my porch. I put on my heavy, noise-canceling headphones, held my breath, and pressed play. The audio was crisp and startlingly clear. I immediately recognized the ambient background noise of a high-end restaurant, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the faint hum of classical music. Then, Elena spoke. Her voice was not the fake, tearful pitch she used for the Miami police, nor was it the venomous hiss she directed at me over the phone. It was completely flat, devoid of any emotion, and terrifyingly businesslike. "Julian is completely hooked," Elena said smoothly. "The wedding is set for the second week of November. We need to execute the drop before the end of the month." A deep, raspy male voice responded. I did not recognize him, but his tone dripped with the slick, calculated confidence of a seasoned criminal attorney. "Are you absolutely sure the Vance family will not involve federal agents right away? A ransom demand of $5 million in untraceable cryptocurrency is guaranteed to raise massive red flags." Elena, "Julian's father hates bad press more than he loves his own money," Elena replied confidently. when I show them the threatening letters from the cartel, when I fall to my knees and scream that a violent gang is going to butcher my secret children, the old man will pay the $5 million quietly, just to keep the scandal out of the Financial Times. He will see it as a cheap price to protect the Vance Empire's stock valuation. I sat paralyzed, the air completely leaving my lungs. A kidnapping. She was not just hiding her children to secure a wealthy husband. She was actively orchestrating a massive fictional kidnapping to extort $5 million from her billionaire fiancé's family. The recording continued, and the male voice sighed. "And what about the children? They are currently sitting with your sister. What happens when the money is transferred? You cannot just make them disappear." Elena let out a soft, dark chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Oh, the children will be perfectly fine. My sister is watching them. She is obsessively protective. She will make sure they are fed, happy, and completely oblivious. That is the beauty of it. They think they are playing a secret spy game. If anyone questions them, they will innocently say their loving aunt has been taking wonderful care of them the whole time. Their testimony will make her look like an absolute saint." "Until the money clears," the lawyer interjected smoothly. "Exactly," Elena said, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "Once the $5 million hits the offshore accounts, I am flying straight to Dubai. I have already secured the forged passports. The moment I touch down, you release the digital breadcrumbs to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the fake emails, the doctored bank transfers, the planted evidence showing my sister hired the fake gang to kidnap her own niece and nephew." The male voice sounded almost impressed. "You are going to frame your own flesh and blood for a federal crime?" "She is the perfect scapegoat," Elena spat, a sudden wave of genuine malice bleeding into her words. "She has always been jealous of me. She is a frustrated, infertile corporate drone who desperately wants my kids. The feds will eat that narrative right up. They will raid her house, find the children locked inside, and find the encrypted computer I planted in her basement last month. She will spend 20 years in a federal penitentiary for extortion and child abduction. Julian will mourn his heartbroken bride who fled out of grief, and I will be sitting on a private beach with $5 million. I ripped the headphones off my ears, gasping for air as if I had been physically punched in the stomach. The sheer, unadulterated evil of her master plan was almost impossible to process. The entire setup, leaving the kids on my porch with expensive toys, the cheerful spy game lie. It was all a meticulously crafted psychological trap. Leaving Mia and Leo in absolute comfort at my house was the ultimate insurance policy. As long as the kids were happy, they would never suspect a single thing. If the local police came knocking during the initial stages, the children's innocent, glowing reports of playing games with their aunt would perfectly shield the operation. It kept the situation calm and completely under the radar. It ensured I felt a false sense of security, believing I was simply dealing with a terrible custody battle. I was completely blind to the fact that I was standing directly on a landmine, waiting for the exact moment Elena pushed the detonator. I was meant to be the villain in her blockbuster tragedy. She was going to let me fall in love with these children, let me build a warm home for them, only to have a federal SWAT team kick my door down, rip them out of my arms, and throw me into a concrete cell for the rest of my adult life. I stared at the tiny black device resting on my wooden desk. The paralyzing shock slowly evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear rage. Elena thought she was the smartest person in the room. She thought she could play God with our lives and walk away incredibly rich. But she had made one fatal, arrogant mistake. She left her complete playbook in the hands of the exact person she intended to completely destroy. The initial shock that had paralyzed me in the laundry room did not last. It burned away, replaced by a cold, terrifying, and absolute clarity. I was no longer a frightened woman trying to defend her family against an erratic sister. I was a project manager facing a hostile, incredibly dangerous threat, and I knew exactly how to dismantle a complex system piece by piece. Elena expected me to cower, to run to the local authorities in a blind panic. or to crumble under the crushing weight of her fabricated federal case. I decided, in that very moment, that I would not play defense any longer. I was going to burn her entire master plan to the ground. First, I needed to secure the most precious assets. I logged into my banking portal and aggressively liquidated my entire retirement savings account and my emergency funds. Every single penny I had worked for over the past 10 years was transferred into a high-yield checking account by 9 o'clock the next morning. I used those funds to hire a top-tier private security firm composed of former military personnel. Within 24 hours, Mia, Leo, and I were quietly relocated to a fortified, unlisted safe house on the outskirts of the city. It was a beautiful, sprawling cabin surrounded by tall trees, heavily monitored by cameras, and guarded around the clock. I made sure the inside was filled with warm blankets, freshly baked cookies, and all their favorite movies for the children. The secret spy game had just upgraded to a super-secret woodland headquarters. Their days remained filled with laughter and joy, utterly shielded from the violent storm brewing outside. With the children entirely safe and protected, I went to work. I bought a brand new, completely untraceable computer and spent 3 sleepless nights extracting every single byte of data from the microscopic recording device. I did not stop there. I hired an elite forensic accountant, paying him an exorbitant retainer in cash, to officially trace the hundreds of thousands of dollars Elena had drained from the Children's Education Fund. He managed to pull the exact wire transfer receipts showing the trust money flowing directly into the accounts of luxury car dealerships and high-end jewelry boutiques. Furthermore, we dug deep into the encrypted folders she had planted on the computer in my basement, carefully isolating the forged text messages and the fake wire transfers she had purchased from black market hackers to frame me. I had everything. The entire anatomy of her $5 million extortion plot was perfectly documented and thoroughly verified. The next crucial decision was how to deliver this fatal blow. Taking this mountain of evidence to the local police department was far too risky. Elena was currently sleeping in a billionaire's bed. With one phone call, Julian Vance could unleash a small army of highly paid defense attorneys who would tie up the local jurisdiction in endless red tape, claiming the audio recordings were manipulated and the financial documents were illegally obtained. Elena might actually slip away to utterly destroy a parasite feeding on a billionaire. You do not call the police. You call the host. I utilized my corporate connections to bypass the standard public relations gatekeepers and secured a direct, encrypted phone line to Richard Sterling, the imposing, notoriously ruthless head of global security for the Vance family enterprise. I did not waste his time with emotional pleas. I spoke to him exactly as I would speak to a board of directors. I informed him that a massive, highly sophisticated extortion plot was currently being executed against his employer, and I had the undeniable proof. Sterling flew to Seattle the very next morning on a private jet. We met in a secure, windowless conference room in a downtown hotel. I slid a heavy black leather binder across the mahogany table. He sat in total silence for 2 agonizing hours, meticulously reading every financial ledger, reviewing the forged federal evidence, and listening to the damning audio recordings of Elena plotting to steal $5 million from his boss. When Sterling finally looked up, his eyes were completely devoid of warmth. The Vance family was fiercely protective of their empire. They did not take kindly to being viewed as a naive cash cow by a grifting sociopath. The wrath of unlimited wealth is a terrifying thing to witness. Sterling immediately brought the Federal Bureau of Investigation into the fold, utilizing the Vance family's high-level government connections to bypass the usual bureaucratic delays. We sat in that room and meticulously wove a massive, inescapable net. The federal agents were stunned by the sheer audacity of Elena's plan, but they were absolutely thrilled to have a perfectly documented case handed to them on a silver platter. They agreed to follow her script just enough to let her step off the ledge, allowing her to officially commit federal wire fraud and extortion before snapping the trap shut. I returned to the safe house that evening, feeling an immense, powerful sense of control. I packed a sleek silver aluminum briefcase, Inside, I placed the original micro-recorder, the certified financial traces of the stolen inheritance, and a printed transcript of her confession. It was my own personal dossier of truth. Everything was perfectly aligned. I was no longer the helpless victim waiting for a federal raid. I was the architect of her impending doom. All that was left to do was wait for the precise moment when Elena stood at the absolute highest peak of her magnificent, glittering mountain of lies. And then, I would personally push her off. The second Saturday of November arrived with a stifling, humid heat that clung to the Miami coastline. The engagement party was held at a sprawling $40 million waterfront estate owned by the Vance family. It was a dizzying display of obscene wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from temporary outdoor pavilions, thousands of white roses cascaded down sweeping marble staircases, and the guest list was a tightly curated selection of powerful political elites, prominent media moguls, and high society billionaires. Elena was completely in her element. She wore a custom silk gown that trailed elegantly across the polished floor, her massive diamond engagement ring catching the light with every calculated wave of her hand. I stood hidden in the deep shadows of the main hallway, clutching my silver aluminum briefcase, flanked by 3 federal agents wearing dark tactical gear. Standing directly next to me, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like carved granite, was Julian Vance. We watched her silently through the grand archway. A sharp clinking of a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute brought the hundreds of guests to a hushed silence. Elena stepped gracefully up to the elevated podium at the center of the ballroom. She gripped the microphone, her perfectly manicured hands visibly trembling. It was a masterful, sickening performance. She let out a soft, choked sob, looking out at the sea of powerful faces. "My dearest friends, and my beloved Julian," she began, her voice cracking with expertly faked agony. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate our love, but I stand before you with a shattered heart. I have been hiding a terrible, agonizing truth to protect the ones I love. My 2 beautiful children have been forcefully taken from me." That was my exact cue. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors and walked straight down the center aisle. I was not wearing a designer gown. I wore a sharp, tailored gray suit, my low heels clicking loudly and rhythmically against the marble floor. The crowd parted instantly, murmuring in confusion as they saw the stern federal agents marching in absolute synchronization right behind me. Julian walked rigidly at my side. Elena froze mid-sob. All the color instantly drained from her perfectly bronzed face when she saw her billionaire fiancé walking alongside the exact sister she was actively trying to frame for a major federal crime. Before she could utter another fabricated word about a fake cartel, Richard Sterling, who had quietly taken control of the event's central audio system, pressed a single button on his encrypted tablet. The soft classical background music cut out instantly. Suddenly, Elena's own voice echoed through the massive, high-definition concert speakers, booming across the dead, silent ballroom. "When I show them the threatening letters from the cartel, when I fall to my knees and scream that a violent gang is going to butcher my secret children, the old man will pay the $5 million quietly. Once the $5 million hits the offshore accounts, I am flying straight to Dubai. She is a frustrated, infertile corporate drone who desperately wants my kids. The feds will eat that narrative right up." The audio clip played in its entirety, raw and completely unedited. The silence that followed was deafening. The political elites stared in absolute unblinking horror. The media moguls discreetly pulled out their cellular phones to record the unbelievable spectacle. Elena completely collapsed. Her knees gave out, and she fell hard onto the polished stage, her expensive silk gown tangling around her legs. "No, no, that is a fake. It is artificial intelligence. Julian, you have to believe me. She is setting me up," she shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly in the vast, opulent space. Julian did not say a single word. He walked up the short flight of stairs to the stage, reached down, and grabbed her left hand. He did not pull her up. With a swift, merciless tug, He stripped the multi-million-dollar diamond ring right off her finger. He dropped her hand as if it were infected, turning his back on her forever. Two federal agents immediately rushed the stage. They grabbed Elena by the arms, hauling her roughly to her feet. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked loudly over her wrists. Right there, under the blinding lights of her own lavish party, the lead agent read her rights. She was officially arrested for massive wire fraud, felony extortion, and filing a false police report. She screamed, she kicked, and she begged, but the crowd simply watched with cold disgust as she was dragged away. Losing her fake reputation, her stolen money, and her freedom all in one devastating moment. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. 6 months later, I sat in a quiet, wood-paneled family courtroom in Seattle. The judge firmly struck his gavel, officially granting me full, permanent legal guardianship of Mia and Leo. Furthermore, the federal court ordered the immediate liquidation of all of Elena's remaining personal assets, seizing her sports cars and designer jewelry to completely restore the hundreds of thousands of dollars she had stolen from the Children's Education Fund. But the true victory was not found in a courtroom, nor was it found in knowing my sister was sitting in a federal penitentiary awaiting a trial that would undoubtedly lock her away for decades. The real victory is right here, in my kitchen on a random Tuesday evening. The house smells warmly of baking garlic bread and simmering pasta sauce. I can hear the loud, chaotic, and incredibly beautiful sound of two little kids racing down the hallway. Leo comes sliding into the kitchen in his socks, holding his freshly washed smart teddy bear, giggling uncontrollably. Mia runs in right behind him, her face flushed with pure joy. She wraps her arms tightly around my waist, looking up at me with bright, happy eyes. "What is for dinner, Mom?" she asks brightly. Mom. That single, beautiful word is the ultimate, most devastating revenge I could have ever taken. I look down at my two incredible children, my heart completely full. Elena tried to use them as pawns, but she handed me the greatest gift of my entire life. I have built a fortress of love around them, a radiant, happy life that the cold-blooded monster sitting in a concrete cell will never, ever be allowed to touch. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know in the comments below. Also, if you found today's story engaging and want to help our channel out, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can scan the QR code on your screen or use the donation link in the description and pinned comment. Your generous contribution helps us pay our hardworking staff, allowing them to support their families and continue bringing you even more incredible stories. Thank you again, and take care.